this is exactly what we really have been trying to focus on with what we're doing with design thinking at Marshall, which is to spread it actually to educators. Our model is actually where so I have a center. Before I became the interim dean of the College of Business, I have an innovation center, and really the innovation center really only had one goal, which was to blast design thinking out to whoever would have us, basically. Where we saw that it worked the best was actually with educators, educators in the K through 12 space, educators in college, educators of adults, and we ended up realizing that if we can empower educators with design thinking, then they could then teach design thinking to their people, and you could kind of have this viral effect that would happen. So that's really been sort of our prevailing model at Marshall. Is we've really been targeting teaching design thinking to our different professors in all the different majors, and actually even like the staff, like the football team and the dorms and the dining, like literally the entire campus, teaching them design thinking, so that way they can innovate for their particular stakeholders, whoever that might be, and then also taking design thinking and innovation and placing it into their world where they're subject matter experts in their world. So this is really great. I hope that today you'll find a lot of value in it, and if you do, then maybe it'll inspire you to continue incorporating design thinking to help impact the stakeholders, the students that you all serve. So that today what we'll be doing is it'll start off with me kind of like setting things up and talking a bunch, but then somewhere around 20 minutes in, it really just flips and it turns over to you all, where you all will learn design thinking by doing it. So it's a very active workshop. So it's sort of kind of like lecture by Professor Ben for 20 minutes, but then it becomes really your workshop after that, and I'll just be a facilitator guiding you along the way. So. What are sort of like the three goals for today? This will be a good workshop if, number one, I expose you all to the basics of design thinking. So none of you all will necessarily walk out of here as like design thinking experts, but what I do hope that you walk out of here is I understand it at a fundamental level, and I think I might be able to apply it to when I go back home. So that's the first thing, is just this exposure. The second thing is for you to practice it by doing it and have a little bit of fun. I think you all are here and you're probably meeting each other and making new friends and colleagues here. So like I said, the interactive portion is fun, and I think you all learn a little bit more about each other, which is always fun from my point of view to watch it too. And then the third, if you're interested in, like, this training is the training that we give to people at Marshall and all of our students and faculty and staff. And at Marshall, you get a micro credential. So if you're interested in getting the micro credential, you can. It's free at Marshall. I think we might be able to give you a discount or something. But if you don't have to do it, but if you want it, you can. But more importantly, the knowledge is spreading the knowledge here. Whether or not you get a badge is kind of whatever, up to you all if you want that kind of thing. But it's completely optional thing. So the ground rules, really, number one is to have fun. This is, again, it's supposed to be a fun and engaging workshop. I hope that it is. If I made this thing well, then you all will have fun. But that's the first rule. The second one is to ask questions if you have them. There's a lot of things that intuitively, like everything that I'm going to tell you today is like, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course, like it's like common sense. But for whatever reason, people just don't do it. It's kind of like there's biases that we have towards innovation that make it hard for us to innovate, even though everything I'm going to tell you makes sense. It's good to ask questions to kind of like unpack some of the reasons why. Even though things seem very intuitive, like why doesn't that translate into behavior? The second thing is to stay on track. You will feel rushed during this. You will feel like there's not enough time. I only have half the information I want. But that's kind of like part of the process of design thinking, is to really is to be able to make the best intuitive decision that you can, even without all of the information. Because unfortunately, we all live in a world where there's time pressures and there's pressures left and right, and a lot of times you just kind of have to like do the best you can, regardless of the situation around you. So many times in life, you're often having to make the best decision you can in less time than you would like to have. And then the other thing is to stay, like, there's a lot of people in here, so like, especially when we get to the workshop part where you all will be doing a lot of things. I'll be giving you all instructions. You all will, it'll turn into chaos because you all will do those things for like 5 or 10 minutes, and they'll somehow have to like pull you back in to give you more instructions. So there's this whole process of like me giving you all instructions, you doing it, the room turning into chaos, me bringing you back in to give you more instructions. So it's this sort of this ping pong back and forth of like like disorder and order. So if you all could help me out, that whenever I come back up here to give you the next set of instructions, that you give me your attention, so that way I can then release you back to chaos. So what is design thinking? And I'm just kind of curious, how many people here have heard the term design thinking before? Okay, 1 or 2 here. Yeah. Okay. It's kind of an interesting thing, because it's like you're like, what does design thinking even mean? I'm going to teach it to you today as a process. Like, it'll seem like step 1, step 2, step 3, but it's not actually meant to be a process. I'm going to teach it to you like a process, just like when you teach somebody how to ride a bike. But eventually, like, the kid just rides the bike. It's not like mechanical anymore. Or like when you drive a car, like kind of like trying to keep the car on the road, but then eventually you just drive. So this will be similar to that, where like it'll be sort of step 1, step 2, step 3, but actually the steps are not just steps; they're like principles, and they're mindsets rather than just steps. So that's why it's like design thinking rather than like the design process. So what is it? Just kind of like the short version of what design thinking is it's a process or principles for innovating solutions to problems. So it's a way to solve problems, basically. But what's important to distinguish about, there's a lot of different ways to solve problems, and there's a lot of different processes to solve problems. But like, what makes the design thinking process unique is that you're not just solving any problems, you're solving complex human-centered problems. And you're not just creating solutions, you're creating solutions that are awesome. And that's important. Those are important distinctions to make. So let me start with the first part first, about they're not just problems, they're human-centered problems. So they're complex human-centered problems. So what does complex human-centered problem mean? Well, the human-centered is pretty easy. It's like you can't use design thinking for like conceptual problems like math. Like, you can't solve algebra with like design thinking. What it's used for is like people problems. So I have a student that I need to innovate for. I have a customer that I need to innovate for. I have a shareholder, I have an employee, I have a patient. Those are all people, and you can use design thinking for these human-centered people problems. That's the first part. The second type of problem is a complex problem. What I mean by complex problem is, so all problems inherently you don't necessarily know the answer to, that's why it's a problem. But on complex problems, it's a special flavor of a problem, which, like, not only do you not know the answer to the problem, you also don't know the problem very well, and you also don't know the alternatives very well. So it's like, a humbling problem, because it's like, man, I don't even know if I understand the problem, let alone a solution. Versus, like, let me contrast that with a simple problem, and you'll see the differences a little bit better. So a simple problem would be like, I always equate this to like, the high school seniors trying to decide if they want to go to college, or which college they want to go to. And that would be somewhat of a simple problem. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm just saying it's simple in the sense that it's clear. So like, an 18-year-old student high school student might have their college choices down to WVU, Ohio U, Ohio State, whatever it is. There's like 3 there, and then they have to they don't know the answer yet, they don't know the solution, but they at least know, hey, I know what my problem is, which is I got to pick a college, and I know what the alternatives are. It's those handful of schools, but it's just I got to figure out the answer, right? I got to figure out the solution. That's a simple problem. But if I gave you a complex problem, a complex problem would be like, how do we solve generational poverty in Appalachia? It's like, it's definitely not clear what the answer is, but it's not even clear what the problem is. Is it an economic problem? Maybe. Is it a cultural problem? Maybe. Is it a healthcare problem? Maybe. Is it an educational problem? Maybe. It's probably all of those, depending on you, on which one, how you're looking at it. And what are the alternatives to that? As many as you can innovate. There's limitless amounts of alternatives to a problem like, how do we reverse generational poverty in Appalachia? There's not just one alternative or 2 alternatives. So you can see really the difference between like, how do I pick a college between these 3 colleges? how do we solve this thing over here, which I don't even know what that thing is or what the alternatives are. So design thinking is more for this complex type of stuff where you, again, you have to have the humility to even say, I don't even know if I know the problem precisely yet. So that's the problem that you can use design thinking for. With regard to the solutions, you're trying to create solutions, not just any solutions, but awesome solutions to these complex human-centered problems. And what is the difference between a solution versus an awesome solution? The difference is, think of the last time you came up with, the last time you encountered something that was innovative. And think about why you thought it was innovative. You thought it was innovative not just because it worked. The world is full of things that work. We're all, in many ways, you're encountering solutions and products all over the place that work, but you don't call all those things innovative. You don't call all of those things innovative. You actually reserve the term innovative for solutions that come to your life that are 10 times better than the existing alternative, or it drives this emotional reaction oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. There's this emotional component that comes with truly innovative things that you don't just get with things that work. So yeah, are you trying to build solutions that work at a very, very fundamental level? Yes, I guess that is true. But when you're trying to innovate, you're actually trying to go 10 times beyond that into creating solutions that not only work, but are truly, truly awesome in the eyes of the person you're trying to solve for. So that's design thinking. It's a process to do that. The best companies in the world are design companies. And I show you this slide not just because it's got a bunch of logos, but because it's the variety and the breadth of industries it can be applied in. So Legos is toys. Of course, in tech, a lot of times it appears in tech with Apple, but then you also see consumer retail food and Starbucks and entertainment and Disney, and then you see education with Stanford. So this idea of complex human-centered problems, there's a variety of different contexts it can be used. Education is definitely one of those contexts. So how do you do it? Design thinking is the generic term for it. We use a very specific version of it called Design for Delight, which is the one that Intuit uses. The reason why is because I started working with Brad Smith back in 2017. He was the CEO. He's a West Virginian. He became the CEO of Intuit, which makes QuickBooks and TurboTax. And they use design thinking to make Intuit a very innovative company. And he shared design thinking with me to help drive that at Marshall, to teach it to the people at Marshall, my students and everybody at Marshall. So we learned their version of it, and theirs is called Design for Delight. And the reason why I like their version of it, well, number one, it's shorter. It's they've combined 6 steps into 3, which I think is easier to remember. And then also the name of it is more on target. You're not just using design thinking to use design thinking. You're using design thinking to create this emotional delight in the person you're trying to solve the problem for. So it actually gives you the end result there. It gives you the goal, which is you really want to create that innovative, that delightful reaction to whatever it is you're innovating. So what are the 3 principles? Again, I'm going to teach it like they're steps, but again, they're more principles than they are steps. So what is the first step or the first principle? And it goes back to what I said before, which is you don't understand the problem, and you have to be humble enough to understand that you're dealing with a complex problem. And you have to start with what is known as deep customer empathy. And customer, by the way, is just, it can be any stakeholder. Customer, I just mean who are you solving the problem for? In the business context, we call that a customer, but in your context, it might be the student or whoever. So, deep student or customer empathy. What we're trying to do there is we're trying to understand the problem because we don't know it. Even if we think we know it or we have experience in it, it can blind you from how the world has changed many, many times. So you want to always start with a beginner's mindset, even if you have experience. And you want to take a look at the problem through the eyes of the person it matters most in, which is not you, it's actually them. It's the person with the problem. So the goal of deep customer empathy is to walk a mile in the shoes of the person with the problem, to fall in love with the problem from their perspective. And it's really, really hard to do. It's really hard to do because, we have our own biases. We have our own vision of the way the world should be. But again, they're the ones with the problem. We're trying to solve it for them. So we really, really want to learn about the problem through their eyes the best we can. And there's many tools for that, and you'll go through one of those tools today. Once you understand the problem from their perspective, you fall in love with the problem. The second step of design thinking is called go broad to go narrow. And what go broad to go narrow means is you don't want to just start with one idea. You want to brainstorm, and you want to come up with as many possible ideas as you can. And then after you come up with as many possible ideas as you can, then narrow it down to your best one. You got to give yourself the opportunity, instead of just saying, oh, I got an idea. It's good to start with an idea, but come up with 6 or 7 more too, right? Like give yourself a chance to get to that second and third idea that doesn't just immediately come to you, because generally speaking, your first idea is probably the most common idea. And again, a common idea might work, but is it going to be 10 times better? Is it going to really truly create awesome and delight? After the third principle of design thinking is called rapid experiments with customers. And what that basically means is after you've gone broad, come up with a bunch of ideas, you've narrowed it down to one. The idea that you've narrowed down to is just your idea. It's a hypothesis or an assumption that it'll work on the customer and that it'll solve their problem, but you don't know in reality that it will, right? So it's really important to realize an idea is something that's in your head. It's not necessarily something that will translate to your customer or your student and their problems. So what you want to do is you want to quickly and cheaply experiment that idea to find out whether it was effective or not. So get the idea out of your head, build it as fast as you can and as cheaply as you can. We call these scrappy prototypes. We'll literally draw out the idea like with stick figures. We'll make it out of popsicle sticks. We'll build it out of cardboard. We always try to find the cheapest, fastest way we can get the idea out of our head and make it as tangible as possible. Why? So we can hand it to the person with the problem and they can play around with it, and then we can learn 2 things. So these are basically the 2 goals of the rapid experiment. Number 1, what parts worked and like did they find awesome? And then number 2, which we call the positives, and then the second thing are the deltas. And what deltas are, what parts should be changed because it didn't work like we assumed it would. And so we're just testing to find out. You should be really, really proud of the things that delighted them, and you should keep those things. But the things that didn't go as well, the deltas that you would change, those are the things that you want to go back and say, okay, well now let's go for version 2. And you loop it again, and this time it's important to remember it's not just a version 2. Come up with a broad number of version 2s. So now that you sort of know what the results were with the first version, let's go back and let's think of 7 or 8 version 2s. And then let's narrow it down to our best version of version 2. Let's build a scrappy prototype. Let's test it. Let's find out the positive. Let's find out the deltas. And let's go and make a bunch of version 3s. And let's go make a bunch of version 4s. Let's go make a bunch of version 5s. And you just keep working it and working it and working it until when? Till it works? No, not till it works, until it's awesome. Until it's awesome. In the eyes of, not to you, but in the eyes of the student or the customer that you're trying to solve the problem for. So that's the general principles of it. And it's really, the key to remembering this is you're never going to get it right the first time because it's a complex problem. It's hard. So you're never going to be perfect the first time on it, ever. But the goal isn't to be perfect the first time. The goal is to be more realistic and to be less wrong over time. So it's about learning over time. It's about creating non-catastrophic failures. It's about reducing risk and uncertainty until you can get to awesome. So just to walk you through how this works a little bit, and again, there'll be a whole interactive session on this here in a second. So let's say that we design vending machines, all right, and and we want to understand what are our customers who come up with. How can we empathize with our customers who come up to our vending machine and try to use it? So if you sort of look at this vending machine, this is what I would not call the most delightful vending machine I've ever seen in my life. But like if you were empathizing with the customers, there are some pretty obvious pain points there. The first one you might say is like, oh yeah, okay, well there's a big hoagie that's stuck in the machine, and then there's a drink that's stuck in the machine, and that might be one of the obvious ones that you as the designer of the vending machine say, that's not good. I don't like that my customers are pained in that way. But if you really put yourselves in the shoes of the customers, you might discover more pain points than just the obvious ones. For example, you might say, oh, okay, well, I noticed that there's only a coin slot there. Wouldn't they like to have the ability to pay with cash? Wouldn't they like the ability to pay with credit card? And then you might also discover that like there's only like, 3 different types of drinks in there. And you're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if like our customers had, like more than just 3, the bigger variety. And then you might also discover, well, we have an entire row missing of food. Shouldn't we keep this better stocked? So, there's the obvious things that you'll see that you as the designer can see, but then there's also some non-obvious things that you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer to be able to see and try to empathize with them. So, those might be some common pains you might observe, and you might have thought of some other ones as well. So then, that's kind of deep customer empathy, and then you're like, okay, well, now that I know some pain points, I've walked a mile on my customer's shoes, let's start brainstorming some ways for a better vending machine. And you might say, okay, well, well, first of all, we want a vending machine that there's no hoagie stuck in it. Okay, so it's like, that's the first thing. It's like design one that doesn't, or food doesn't get stuck. The second thing you might say is like, all right, well, let's make sure it takes credit cards and cash. Okay, that's great. And you might say, third thing is it's fully stocked with lots of different types of snacks and drinks. And if you do that, you'll probably come up with this, right? Is like, this vending machine. And somehow you weren't blown away by my innovation here. Everyone, I didn't hear a gasp saying, "Oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen," because that is what just a regular vending machine that works looks like. There's nothing innovative about this one, but it works, right? So again, back to my point about this is design thinking is not the intention of design thinking is not to create that, because it already exists, right? Even though it works. So what if we went broad once again and we're like, hey, what I pushed you and like, let's go further. How do you actually create something that will create an emotional reaction, something that will be 10 times better than something that works? And I was in a conference not too long ago. This actually has sound. This is why I'm moving. I was at a conference and I came across a vending machine that I want you all to check out. And now we're going to do a little rapid experiment. All right, we're going to test. I already did just one rapid experiment with that other vending machine, this one, and the results were not good. You're kind of like, oh, all right, I mean, whatever, it's a vending machine. Like there was no reaction. But I'm going to show you this one. And what I want everyone to pay attention to is like each other. Just pay attention to each other. And let's try to feel 2 things. Feel what are the moments that the crowd likes it, the wow moments, the positives, and what are the moments that the crowd groans and things we ought to change, all right? So we're going to play this video, and I just want you to pay attention to each other as we're sort of running this rapid experiment. Come on. Oops. I think you have to press the play button. Ready? Yep. And there is a reason why I'm holding a mic to this. So, if you just, I never look at the crowd. I've done this thing a bazillion times, this same workshop a bazillion times, and I never look at the crowd. But I already know what's going to happen because I've done it so much. Where when I'm running this test, this experiment to see what the reactions are, I can always hear what I need to hear. So the first change is pretty, like, what's the first delta that we see? What's the one thing that, you could just hear the crowd like groaning over? Terms and conditions, right? And then what were the things that like wowed the crowd? The song. And my question, the reason why, I mean, it seems obvious, but a lot of times people don't, so my background is in marketing. I have a Ph.D. in marketing, and you can almost over survey yourself. Like, you can send a survey out, and I could say, hey, from a scale of 1 to 10, what did you think about this thing, this vending machine? But there are time and places for surveys, but it's always better if you can to actually walk a mile in your customer's shoes and find out from an emotional level what's working and what's not working. And I immediately knew, I don't need a scale from 1 to 7 to know what's resonating with you all and what's not resonating with you all, because I could hear it, I could feel it. And there was no, it's purely honest. Like, I know that reaction is honest. I know it was truly funny to you all, and I knew the song was, and I knew that the terms and conditions were truly like a groaner for you all, right? So design thinking is not just sort of like, hey, how do I look at this data if I survey 100 people? It's really about really trying to understand the emotional resonance and really sort of seeing the ups and downs of an entire experience. And then obviously, how do you take those deltas and really flip them into something that can be delightful?